I try not to rely on my own intellect, my own knowledge, or my own experience, because what I found out is my experience oftentimes doesn't work, because sometimes I forget to use it. Mama used to tell me always that experience is their best teacher, especially when it's somebody else's. So in other words, there's no need for me to walk and fall in the hole if you already done it and told me about it. My children, it sounds like, and I started using them as an example, that it seemed like they want to just go down and they want to bump their own head. But then God convicted me one morning, because he said, just the same way you talk about your children, you do the same thing.
That's right.
You're reading the word and it tells you to do X and you do Y. And Y is what they did at the scripture. What? You're bumping your own head. So I find it interesting, because whenever it talks about the same day, in verse 35, when he come, he said unto us, let us go pass over to the other side. What was interesting is God had given direction, and then when it got over to 37, when the great storm came, all of a sudden, all the stuff that was happening before this passage of scripture, God was doing miracles. They were experiencing miracles with Jesus. It wasn't like they didn't know who he was. Right. This is the very man that did the miracles. This is the very man that called them from their own ways. But yet, he had peace then. But all of a sudden, the storm comes. They forgot everything.
Yes.
So then when I started thinking about it, I'm saying, oh, wait a minute. Our finances, fit, all the different things happen in your life. Sometimes you don't have peace. So now I want to do the talk back. When you think about some of the stuff that just not working like you want to work, what are those things you think about?
All kinds of stuff.
Such as?
Well, there's anger with me.
Yeah.
I try to control myself. When I was with God, I used to talk. I talked back. I had anger, but now I stop myself. And then, because I learned not to, I can't control other people. But other people do not understand what, they do the same thing to anger you. And they go on to anger you, but you can't stop them. So I have to just try and believe as much as I can, and then I end up forgetting, so anger comes out.
Yeah. So can I ask you this? Those people that does those things, what is it that triggers you? Because one of the things about anger is often a result of something that triggers. The person that's doing whatever is not the issue. It's a trigger inside of you, even though we blame it on other people. That I'm just telling you something I not heard, but something I know. So it's a root cause. Okay, there it is.
The way I look and who I am, I look so different. It's
I joined the club.
hard for me. It's hard for me to do anything else.
In America.
The first thing people do is look at me. They don't look at who I am. They straight look at me first. And then after that, if I say something, I'm not there. In their eyes, I'm not there. It seems like to me, and I want to say, hey, I'm right here. But I'm invisible.
Invisible man.
But you know what? Aaron, let me encourage you, because even with that storm, if you respond to that storm the way God wants you to, that which seems to be invisible will get attention at the right time. See, God don't want to take you to a place where your character can't keep you. So if you start getting the spotlight and you respond in anger, then that's not going to reflect good on him. So as a result, he's working stuff out in you, so that your storms, when you start getting that repetition of that storm and you start remembering how to respond, that then when God knows that you got that lesson, he can promote you for visibility. So I want to suggest to you, you're in a good spot. He just wants you to learn, want to remember. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was, for me, it was a lot of abuse when I was little. When people poke at me, I used to tend to fight. I used to get mad, angry, and I would want to hurt them.
Right.
But the abuse came from my father and my mother, And I grew up that way, and I didn't know how to act. I was telling Linda a while ago, I don't know how to act sometimes. Sometimes I get overwhelmed. You know, I get excited when something good happens, and I get a little loud. Like a little kid with a new toy. You know, since I was in special ed all my life, and it's really hard on me. But I realize that God has been there all this time. He has been right by my side all this time, because I wouldn't be here. I mean, when we were both alcoholics, druggies, we did everything. Now we don't even smoke a cigarette. We quit everything. We found God, and we pray together. We try not to argue with each other, to hurt each other, because when people argue, they tend to say things that hurt each other, and we both know that we've both been abused by our parents.
Right.
And we don't want to do that to each other.
Right. And even with this passage of scripture, remember, Jesus is all-knowing, meaning that he knew this was coming, right? And so when you think about, he tells them, hey, we're going to go to the other side. But Jesus knew between the direction to go to the other side and the arrival of coming to the other side, there's going to be experienced a storm.
Turbulence.
Yeah, there will be turbulence. But what's interesting is God knows. He knew it already. Now, what was amazing is the reason why, have you noticed that there's two ways that God speaks? And Jesus, you'll see it in the Gospels. You see it in this passage of scripture just read for you. He either speaks in command or questions. Never casual conversation.
True.
Jesus speaks, and reason why? Because everything, he does it on purpose. Because everything he says is a command. And when it's not a command, it is a question. And the question is to get not him to know, but for you to know.
Yes.
Man, and see, that's the stuff that I kind of like to talk back, because I can't say that that'll take me down in the whole hour to deal with that. Right? But let me tell you this. This is really bless you, because this has blessed me. I finally realized Jesus speaks in those two ways. Ask yourself, anytime you read the words of Jesus in the Gospels, and it's in red, it's one of those two ways. It's never casual conversation. Which goes to what we do, because oftentimes we talk casually and ain't talking about nothing.
Lord have mercy.
Barbershop talk. I got quiet on that one. I experienced a lot of that.
You know, I wondered, I just had to read it out loud, and, you know, sometimes as Christians, you know, we go, you know, the Holy Spirit will be God's with me, and then something happens, and then I'm yelling at Jesus, do something, and just when I read it, I realized, to my remembrance, there were other people in other boats. And I wonder what was going on in the other boats. Was the storm just was the disciples just terrified and they knew Jesus was in the boat, so they're yelling at him? If I was in the other boat, was it like, oh, these are bad, you know, it's bad, but we'll be okay. And then everything got calm again, like, see? I just wonder, because sometimes we get so worried because we think we're
Not on the same boat.
yeah.
And here's what's interesting. Again, y'all remember I told you when I first started talking, there's a couple things I didn't get to say. But one of the things I didn't get to say is, and it goes to the point you just made, when they said, go to the other side, look at what it says in verse 36. It says, and when they had sent away the multitude, they took him, even was in the ship, and there was also him other little ships. You can get to other versions, but in other words, they left the multitude, because when they were leaving from this side to go to the other side, there were people who was following Jesus because of all the miracles he had done. But there's sometimes in your life when you're about to encounter a storm, there's some people you've got to let go.
Yes. Amen.
Now, that doesn't mean that they won't follow you.
Yes. Oh, yes, that's true.
But they
But
didn't
you
follow
got-
them into the storm.
Hey, here's the thing. If you look at this passage in the King James Version anyway, he said they sent away the multitude. They commanded the multitude that was with them, because Now, I don't know if it was the day with the disciples. That's what it suggests in the scripture, which is they knew they were going to the other side. There's some stuff they said, you know what? We and Jesus got to go to the other side because we're on a mission. And they told the multitudes, hey, you go away. But there is some of the multitude that did not listen to the disciples and got in some other little boats. Now, their storms wasn't as great, or their boat wasn't as great as your boat, but then they're little boats. And I got to suggest, my sanctified imagination suggests that they encountered the storm too.
Right.
Because the storm just don't happen in a small vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't like it just rained just in this little place. But whatever was happening, Jesus still didn't worry about that. Even for the ones that was following him that wasn't with them, experienced storms. But I got to believe in my sanctified imagination that those people in their little boats was looking at the big boat wondering, hey, are they going to survive? They was probably scared. They was probably, throwing over the stuff to try to get back to the other side. And all of a sudden it got calm. They had to say, man, that got to be Jesus doing that. And they got to the other side, which suggests that some people are looking at you. If you can get through your storm, they'll see that they can get through their storm.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir.
Yes. That's what I'm hoping.
So you need to rest in peace because there's somebody who has chaos that need the same peace that you got.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
They watching.
So the
Yeah,
little boat,
From your little boat. Because here's a suggestion. Their little boat, too much is given, much is required. Handle a little bit, he'll give you big stuff.
Right.
That's even in your problems. New level, new devil, right? So if you want big things to help your life, you got to expect to be able to handle big problems.
That's right.
That's why even right now, I speak prophetically to Pastor G. He's handling stuff with the problems right now with Christ Missionary with the size you are. So as he manages that and they get through that and you all get through that, then God can say, okay, wait a minute, I can bless them with more people. Because they can handle what they have right now. And other people are looking at you all saying, can you handle this?
Yes, we can.
And what's interesting is when you look at that passage of scripture, this is the part that I want you to talk back to me. It says that the multitude sent away, they took him even in the ship. They took Jesus with them in the ship. All right? And there was also with him other little ships. And then rose a great storm. The waves beat against the ground ship. And so it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And then he awake him. Wait a minute. It's amazing. And I'm wondering, and I don't have an answer to this, but I got to ask the question. They said in the scripture that they took him even he was in the ship. So they took Jesus in the ship, or did they just follow Jesus in the ship? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. They took him even as he was in the ship.
As he was in the ship or as he was.
So was he already in the ship?
You know what that?
go ahead.
Go
You
ahead.
know, the sense that I get from that is that could it be, and I'd have to kind of really do a contextual criticism on this one, really figure, go all the way back to the Greek to figure out where it was. But I'm wondering if he got in the ship, after having told them, send them away, went, and if they did not get into a ship, maybe not knowing that he was in the bottom sleep, took the ship, not knowing that he was there. Are you following what I'm saying? And so they're saying we took the ship, not knowing that in the ship he was already there, if that makes sense. Okay? Because he told them, you go do this, right? Go send them away. So we go on the other side. Did they know that he was in the bottom of the ship, sleep? Oh my God! Don't say that too quick.
So you're getting to the point that I'm trying to make. Of course, most things I tell my team, I tell my kids. Most stuff I always think of I get to the end before I even ask the question. I asked y'all a question knowing where I was going with this. Now listen, and Pastor G just talked about it. It says that they had sent the multitudes away. How could the disciples send the multitudes away without going to the multitudes? They didn't have no microphones. So they had to go out and tell all these multitude of people, hey, y'all go ahead and go away. By that time, they know which boat Jesus was getting on. Jesus goes, get rested up, and they know where they were supposed to go in the first place. And so to his point, contextual conversation would say when they got on the boat, they knew what boat Jesus was on because they knew where they go down in the boat to talk to him.
Right.
But they also had already sent the multitudes away. By the time they got on the boat and started to sail, Jesus was already asleep because he already relaxing.
Right. He's already in the boat.
He already in the boat.
He chilling.
So that's why it says. So
Okay,
what,
yeah. Okay,
exactly.
I get that.
So I'll just. The point is this: is that they were instructed, and they were following the command of Jesus, and that's where I want to stop right there. When he says go to the other side, and then he also had them, tell the multitudes, go ahead. Isn't it interesting that even the disciples, although they later on was challenging their faith, they were still being obedient in what their call was? Can I suggest to you today that even when you get on your ships, just make sure that you be obedient to whatever the call is.
Okay.
Because that's predicated upon the fact that when you do what you're called to do, and then the directive is given, when you follow that, Jesus is with you. So talk back. It ain't just called talk back.
That's a struggle
Why is that a struggle? And I'm not...
because life goes on beyond your purpose. Everything is moving around you.
Right.
And it's easier to get distracted than it is to stay focused and get tunnel vision and do what you're supposed to do. You know what I mean?
Hey, you just said a mouthful. Did y'all hear what he said? What's amazing about what he just said, do y'all remember Peter? He was obedient when he says, Jesus bid me to come. Obedient. Stepped out, started walking on water. And then, like you said, life goes on, storms rise. Then he takes his eye off of Jesus and starts sinking. And then why did he get scared? If he's sinking and he's close to Jesus,
Faith.
didn't he know that Jesus wasn't going to let him drown? Because he gave him the commandment in the first place. But you're right.
Your faith get questioned when your feet start going in. Wait a minute.
Right.
But here's the question that I have with all of this, and I'm not gonna get too deep with it. It's just a basic. One of the things that we've taught about the sea where this happened is it's a sea where storms come up quickly, and storms come up without notification, meaning that you don't always see the clouds coming.
Right.
You can be halfway out and there it is.
Right.
Florida weather.
Yeah, so Indiana weather to be good, right? I often wonder in terms of the distractions for the disciples. You've got all this stuff that Jesus is doing. On what level are they thinking? And how easily are they distracted by the little boats, by the storm that could possibly come up, by some of them could have been asking, where is Jesus? Did we leave him? Right? Or they could have been thinking, let's hurry up and go. Right? Because at this point, he's got a situation where Jesus can be thrown. Right? We got a situation where people are like, okay, this dude is deep. I'm with this. And so now they kind of go from a follower of Jesus to probably a protector of Jesus. Right? They're in this place where it's like, I need y'all to step back and give us some room, And so I just wonder how easily distracted from what Jesus was trying to get across to them were they at this point?
Well, I want to suggest that their concern was greater than we give it credit for. Here's why.
I think so.
Look at what it says that they did when in verse 38. And when he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on the pillow, and they awake him and said unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? Wait a minute. Here's how I know that this is a deep concern. Because it's what I call catastrophic expectations. They were asking Jesus, don't you care that we will about to die?
The why me question.
It gets deeper than not only why me, but you're about to let me die. Perish. That wasn't any other word but than to die. They literally lost faith.
But here's my question. They didn't ask him, don't you care that we about to die? If don't you care, and include Jesus in it, is Jesus, don't you care that the humans here with you are about to die? They weren't even really asking him that Jesus is going to die too, because he's in the same ship.
Well, I would suggest that they actually are saying that we all die because they don't know. Because what they're saying is, hey, don't you care that we're about to perish? In other words, in their minds, their finite minds, they thinking that this ship is going to sink, we all going to drown, and you going down with us. Don't you care?
Okay.
Now they heard that, hey, he's Messiah. They know that, but they initially believed because they started following. However, to your point, they lost faith and forgot who he was.
That's right.
But let's run this, keep running this. Wait a minute, let's deal with this word care.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because I think, and I wish we could drill down on it a little bit more. Drill down on it because here's my deal. Their parallel understanding of the word care had to do with this pillow. Had to do with this, you sleep. Had to do with this, look at how you're responding to the situation. There's a storm and you're on a pillow. You're in comfort. You chilling. There's a storm and look what you're doing. Now, this is what we're doing. And what we're doing and what you're doing ain't the same. And so when I think about us who are going through our storms, how we respond and how people see us respond can evoke the question, okay, your house is in foreclosure and you still worshiping?
You don't care God's foreclosure?
Do you not care about you? You know what I'm saying? All right? You got, I'm not saying that you do. I'm just saying this. You've been diagnosed with cancer. They just gave you a stage 4 diagnosis and you still worship it. Do you not care? You see what I'm saying? It's how can you respond to your storm like that? To me, that says you must not care. And to you, it's saying you don't know who I am.
Right.
You don't know whose I am. You don't know what I know, if that makes sense.
And that there lies the points I was giving you all in terms of remembering. Because when you say you don't care, this is the same care that casts all your cares, your anxieties, your worries on him, for he cares for you. So the object of care, it comes from the one who can give it.
All right.
Are you with me? The object of care comes from the one who can give it.
Okay.
Don't you care for us? But then that lets me know that they really didn't understand who and how powerful, that he's the God man. The God man can't die. So when we get in those situations, it's all temporal. That's why the Bible, you hear preachers talk about precept on precept. The precept of care has to do with cast your care on him, for he cares for you. For his burdens are what?
Easy.
Easy. His yoke is easy, burden is light. His yoke is easy, burden is light. Precept on precept. Because when you start to understand that the object of the one who cares is who's caring, it's God who cares for us. Then you see, the problem is we equate God's care for us with somebody else's care for us. There you go.
That's our understanding of care, though, as human beings. That, to me, that's very similar to our perverse idea of love and what we think love is. And it's just no comparison to God's love and what we as mankind see as love.
Right. And so as a result of care, the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So again, this is disciple. We're not talking about, notice every other miracle before was done for people. But all of a sudden, he speaks to the elements. Still, it's beyond our conception. Same thing about care. We asking him, does he care for us? But you remember, they're disciples. They know how they care for each other and how they kind of competing in each other and trying to see who's the best of them all and all this. This is a different type of care. So now they're asking, do you really care for us?
But they had a sleeping Jesus and a noisy storm. And
the squeaky oil get the squeaky wheel get the oil.
Jesus is asleep, and there's a storm going, and they were going, well, okay, sleep, storm, wake up.
Right, that's where I am. I'm like,
yeah, no, and you get a good point. But here's the thing, don't you care? And then Jesus, notice this is what's crazy. Jesus then, and he arose. Let me stop right there. Couldn't deal with it then. Isn't it interesting? Most of the time now, he wasn't in a slumber sleep as if in death.
Right.
He was still living, but then he awoke. His peace, he had it before and after his sleep.
Yeah.
Can I suggest to you today that regardless of what's going on in your life, you need to have some rest and some peace before and after you sleep.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, he arose to a storm.
Yeah.
And what was going on outside did not affect him
On the inside.
on the inside. So he sees it.
And
but
notice
he
this.
still.
Just imagine this. He wakes up, so he heard him. The very first thing he does, rebuke the wind. And then speaks to the waves. He didn't even respond to them.
He talked to the situation.
Yeah, talk to the situation.
My God.
Why is it that then we always talking to people?
Well,
Or the thing that we call the storm, the ship. The people in the relationship, the people in the stewardship, that we mad at the church in the past for asking for tithes, but yet your money funny. We try to speak to stuff we don't like. Why not speak to the situation?
Wow. That's cool.
You are awesome.
So God is. God certainly is. But notice, he stands up and says, rebukes the wind, speaks to the sea, peace be still. And notice what happens. It's conjunction. As soon as that happened, and there was a great calm. Now, isn't it interesting that when Jesus speaks to the situation, he literally becomes the thermostat. All of a sudden, when he sleep, everything was thermometric. The wind's blowing. If you had to tell what's going on with the disciples, they was concerned, so their heat was high. All of a sudden, Jesus comes up, and all of a sudden, thermostat. Let me set the atmosphere.
Now, I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you say speak to the situation, isn't that like you feel like you have some kind of control over it?
No, you're saying that you don't have control, but God does.
Right, no, what I'm saying, like, when you say that,
Yeah,
he
you
didn't
do.
speak to the people, he spoke to the situation.
Yeah.
Why don't we speak to the situation? Then, to me, I take it as if, why don't I focus on the situation and try to do my best to do something about that situation?
I see what you're saying, but let me kind of put it a different way.
Okay.
In other words, the situation that happened was the wind and the rain, right? The wind and the waves. They spoke to the situation. They didn't like go and try to stop the wind physically. We try to do things physically.
Yeah.
This is the power of life and death is in the tongue. So you speak to the situation and expect it to change. You don't rely on what you're doing. You rely on what he says he'll do. So what's interesting is this is the same scripture. This is what I was telling Pastor G. In Psalm 65, it talks about turbulence and wind and rain, and God controls it. This is what this Old Testament scripture is saying. This is what God will control. So Jesus was literally speaking the word of God to the situation. So when you're speaking to the situation, you're not speaking what you know. You're speaking what God says about the situation, which would presuppose that you got to know what God says about most of the situation you're dealing with.
Right.
That's right. You gotta know.
It also made me think about when you mentioned a little bit ago about distractions. Had Jesus arose and started speaking to the disciples, that was the distraction. He didn't deal with all that drama. He didn't deal with all that mess. Calm down. Y'all just don't y'all know who I am? He didn't even take the time to do that. He just did what he needed to do. Peace, Be still.
That's right.
And get this, notice this. So he wakes up, rebuke, peace be still. Notice what it says right after that. It's these conjunctions. Conjunctions are connectors
All right.
in proper timing.
Okay.
Right? Rebuke and, so the wind stopped. And be still, the waves calms. And see what it says next. And he said unto them.
Didn't get to them too.
Why is it that we're so quick to talk about to them before him? He spoke to them last. And when he did speak, I told you, he speak in command and questions. Let's see what he says. And he said to them, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?
Two questions, fear and faith.
Fear and faith. Notice this. He knew they were scared because it says, Master, don't you care we perish? That's fear. Then he says, how is it you have no faith? In other words, I got to do something about it, but you need to do it yourself.
You need to believe in me, and you need to believe in me.
This is the same disciples. I love this because what you'll notice is, if you ever read chapter 5, that's when they come out of this experience, they get to the other side, and then they're faced with the, what are they faced with? Anybody remember?
The man with the demon.
Legion, yeah.
Legion.
Can I tell you that God is so sovereign that he prepares you for your next battle?
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord.
So all I'm trying to suggest to you today, that when you ought to start resting in peace, it presupposes that you start remembering where your peace comes from. He'll give you a peace that passes all understanding, that will keep your heart and your mind. The two things that gets whirled and swirled when you start worrying, that when the storms of life come, then all of a sudden you forget, then you get worried, then you start getting anxiety, and you start wondering, does God care? Don't look at disciples funny, because we're the same way. But this is where it's called the law of repetition. I'm not talking about the repetition of the issue. I'm saying whenever you see the peace, it's always predicated upon God. He'll give you peace that passes all understanding. It's either what's spoken or what's given. So you can speak peace, but he'll also give you peace. But you can't receive what you don't speak.
I was reading a message on Facebook. Some of y'all will see it. And the message was messy. It was a messy message.
Okay.
And so I went human. So I was, okay, this is a messy message. Well, I'm going to clean up this mess.
Human side.
So I went in. This happened just a few minutes ago. So I went in and I put a little dissertation in there. Because I'm going to clean this mess up. And when I got done cleaning up the message, I was saying to Yvette, her and Brother Mark was upstairs. I said, Yvette, watch this. Select all, delete. Okay? Because it would have been me
Speaking to them.
trying to deal with them when the issue. So to me, it was more important for me to exercise my conversation with God about how do you want to deal with this? Which oftentimes is, I'm going to deal with it in a way that ain't got nothing to do with you. All right? Now, I learned a lot about the people who were stirring the mess. I learned a lot about them just by reading that. Okay, so I'm informed, and chances are they don't know that I'm talking to God about it. If that makes sense. Because what they're expecting is for me to talk to them about it. The world is expecting me to respond to them. And as a human, I had a text. I had put it down.
You were ready.
Oh, I had a response. But that's not what God wanted. Now, there's something about me that in this moment, today, that wasn't about me 10 years ago. Because I wouldn't have gotten in sin. But something today, I've gotten to a place where in the process of doing that, God was speaking to me and saying, no.
Yep. And I would even suggest that even if you get released to say something, it might be a question he'll provide for you. Because sometimes a question oftentimes is not that God don't want to know or don't know. It's just he wants you to think about it. And sometimes what I found even in dealing with people, when you ask them a question and they see that they're not getting under your skin, but you just ask them a question, get them to reflect, they'll back up sometimes. I mean, I'm not suggesting that because I don't know the situation, but I'm just saying, when you do speak, sometimes questions are a great way to speak. Because when you look at,
and then too, when you think about when the question came, because had the question happened before the ands and the ands and the ands, you'd have a totally different answer.
Exactly.
Right? If you asked the question beforehand, right, while the storm is going on, oh yeah, my answer for you, but my answer is contextualized based on the storm. After the storm, I asked the question. I'm still tripping on the fact that, did you see him speak to all of this stuff? And now you ask me the question? Well, wait a minute. First of all, I need to process what you just did.
Right.
And then I need to address your question. But first, I got to deal with what you just did. Now, before that, I'm in the middle of a storm.
Right.
Yeah, I have a response.
Right.
But my response is going to change after.
That's right.
Right.
And that's why timing is so important. But here's what's so crazy. This is what it says. After he asks those two questions, this is amazing. It said, and. Look what it says. And they feared exceedingly and said one to another, wait a minute. My sanctified imagination, but my actual scriptural basis, they still was fearing after they asked a question and they was in a calm.
Right.
They knew he was God. They knew all the miracles, but they still feared exceedingly.
Right.
And I don't know, it's because they held themselves to a higher standard and said, God, I'm fearing because of how he might look at us because we're supposed to be, better than this. I don't know if it's that, or I don't know if they just fearing like, man, you see how much power he really got? Oh my goodness. I don't know what it is. But the truth of the matter is, regardless of how they fear, God is not what they supposed to be feeling right now. He has not given us a spirit of fear, but a love, power, and a sound mind. But yet, they was fearing. Notice what happened. Then they start talking to themselves. Now, I don't know. I like to believe that I'll be like, Jesus, so what am I supposed to learn by this? We were in there together. I probably would be talking to John, but I'd be like, Jesus, come on, tell me what I need to do different. But they were so self-consumed, they was talking to each other. They still wasn't getting it. But notice what happens. Then they look what it says. What manner of man is this? Even as wind and the sea obey him.
No, it's funny because like what you said before, after all the teaching that happened before they got on the boat, and you look back, you see all the different teachings and all the things that they happened. Then they get on the boat, they do the storm. And then they're going, who is this guy? And then when they get off the boat, they run into something else they can't control with this man who was possessed with legion and was breaking chains and running around crazy and nobody can handle it. And they went from a natural thing they couldn't control to a human thing that couldn't be controlled other than by Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And here's what other thing. What I believe what Jesus was so perplexed about, not that Jesus was perplexed, but he was asking them, told them, like, why are you fearful of all this? Because if you notice in verse 33 and 34, I believe, he literally says, basically, he taught in parables. Everything that Jesus taught, he taught in parables. It was nothing but application, right? He wanted you to apply this word in your life. But he says he waited there and he did that. He explained it all to the disciples. So he's giving parables to the multitudes. Then he gave further explanation to his disciples.
Right.
He spent time with them, developing them. Can I grant that part right here for a second? That's why leadership training is so important for the church. Where a pastor speaks to the whole church, congregation, and tell them all the good stuff. But he goes spends more time with the leaders. Because these are the people who are supposed to be willing to lead and help. This is just a little leader. Little plug for leadership training. But here it is. He spent time with them. Personally, he spent more time. So there's some stuff, like for example, with my son or my daughters and all that. What's interesting, I've spent more time with my daughters than I did my son when they were that age. Because I grew up. I knew that I had to prioritize time better. So there's some things I would expect of them to know more of because I spent more time with them. Mm-hmm. Jesus had spent more time with them. He was expecting them to be able to handle this situation a little bit better than they did.
Right.
So talk back to me. How is God, when you hear that, what do you think about your own personal lives?
Well, in 30, I went back to 33 through 35, I think it is, where it's talking about, with many similar parables, Jesus spoke the word to them as much, this is the hard part, as much as they could understand. Yeah, I don't know what your translation says, but and then it goes on to say, well, he did more with the disciples and explaining everything. And number one, to me, that means that as a leader, I must do more, do better to seek to understand what God is trying to tell me in whatever situation is going on. Because there are those others who aren't able to understand, as much as what God means. So you say Jesus is doing stuff, and there's some people that are interpreting what he's doing in a totally different way. There's some folks trying to figure out how to profit off of this man. How can I get this man to do that for me? Wait a minute. There's somebody else is saying, well, dude, I own Dr. David Tavel optical shop. You can't be going around giving people sight. Okay? Because you impacted my business. You follow? Everybody's interpreting what he's doing differently. And I'm trying to think for myself, how can I make sure that I'm getting what he's given so that I can do what he really wants me to do? Because I realize everybody out there watching ain't seeing things the right way. Right? There's somebody at Wonder Bread Company saying, wait a minute, whoa. You can't be pulling bread out of bread. Because you impacted my bottom line. You get what I'm saying? And you can't be, the fish market saying, don't be pulling fish out of fish. So everybody's seeing what Jesus is doing totally different. And I don't want to be the one that's missing it. I want to be the one that's getting it. Right?
It goes back to the point I was making earlier, is that you got to remember your God-given direction. Because notice this, that in 35, he says we're going to the other side. 5:1, they get to the other side. The directive was not necessarily to do a miracle. It just so happened that a miracle was done.
That's right.
Their direction was to get to point from A to point B for their next assignment. But that is to say that when God is going to send you on a direction to go from point A to point B, you're going to have some challenges getting there. But don't let that deter you from your direction. Because the more you start thinking about how people are interpreting, how are these multitudes? You already told them what to do, but they following you. You can get distracted from your direction and lose out on your timing of your blessing. That's why in football, there's something called the timing pattern, where the quarterback throws the ball to a place on the field.
Before the receiver gets there.
Before the receiver gets there. The direction in the huddle is, hey, we're going post right? That means you go straight, cut, you're going to be there. That's the direction, A to B. He's going to encounter some defenders that's going to try to throw him off the square. But if he's worried about who's taking pictures in the stands, if he's worried about if he saw that girl that was in the stand, if he's worried about, wait a minute, this dude trying to bump me and get mad and trying to push him, he can't let any of those distractions distract him because he's got a direction to get to a place on the field. What makes that important, because if he gets there too early, he can really get knocked off his square. He get there too late, his blessing can be intercepted. And this is almost like what the disciples did. He gave direction. The storm was there. Jesus was cool. They trying to figure it out. They mad. They fearful. They talk amongst one another. What kind of man is that? What kind of question is that?
Right.
Now I know people say it ain't no bad question. That's a bad question. My personal
They were still trying to figure it out.
But I understand, but that's a bad
They
question.
never figured out the answer to his question.
True.
So they allowed him to ask them something, and they didn't even bother to address his question at all.
You know, they're not talking to him; they're talking to each other.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, who is this guy?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me make you think about something else. How many questions does God ask for us, and we just ignore them?
Right.
We don't even respond to the question. You talking to me, Lord? I'm talking to you. I'm talking to
somebody else.
I ain't talking to you right now.
Hold on,
Lord. I'm talking to you. What you saying?
And that's funny because notice this, and y'all both just hit what I was about to say. Is that look, they ask him the question, what manner of man is this? That lets you know they wasn't talking to him,
Right.
because they would have said, who are you to do that? They knew not to say that. But that's a bad question talking to each other, because what that tells you is the direction of your question. There's things in your life you need to know, but you're asking the wrong people. They forgot or did not know yet James chapter 1 verse 5. But that's not your excuse. I know you're thinking, what is James chapter 1 verse 5? I'm glad you asked me. He says, if anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask of John.
Right. Nope.
No. Okay. I just want to see if y'all. Let him ask of God, who give it to you liberally and upbraideth not. In other words, freely. So if you have a question and you need some wisdom, you direct your question towards God. Period. Point blank. Period.
But yeah, and that's the mistake that most of us make when it's storm related. We talk among ourselves if we have a friend that we are confident enough in to talk, but the human tells us somebody in the group might have an answer,
right.
But we forget about the main source. And to get to the human understanding is what we find ourselves trying to rely on.
Yeah, and so here's the end all be all, and I want y'all to talk back and I'm done. And that is this, is that there's a couple things here that when you're dealing with needing some answers, the place that you go is God. However, when you do go to somebody else, because there is a blessing and safety in the multitude of counsel, it makes a difference who the counsel is and what kind of counsel they're giving.
Yeah.
If you're going to go to somebody who ain't going to give you the word, you don't want to go to that person. Because the words that I speak that are spirit and they are life, meaning Jesus. But then if you're not speaking Jesus, how are you expecting to get the answers?
Right.
So the source is the first. But if you're going to do something and talk to somebody else, let them be a resource. Oh, y'all missed it. In other words, the person you need to go to is the one that will go to the source too. And that makes them a resource. The only two people you need to be dealing with is a source and a resource. Okay? So as a result of that, the thing that I'll close this and I want you to talk back is that why isn't it interesting that they gave a direction, 35. Verse 5:1, they get to the place that they were going, the other side. God said, hey, let's go to the other side. They get to the other side. They actually was worried that they weren't going to get to where God said we were going. Because he said, let us. Now, if he'd have said, let me go, then they had all the reason to be very concerned.
Right.
But it said, let us.
Yeah.
I kind of like talk back because I get to do the stuff that I'm not going to be able to say during the message.
Right.
So can I tell you this? That's why it's important to get God's direction. Because when God gives you his direction, he's going to say, let us do this. In other words, everything we do, we ought to do with his might, which means it's us in the first place. God with us. Y'all saying today, Emmanuel.
Yes.
That means God with us.
That's right.
So in other words, God says, if I'm with you, know that, lo, I am with you even until the end of time.
Yeah.
That ought to build, if nothing else, that ought to build your faith.
Yes.
Yeah,
That'll preach.
yeah. So that-
So talk back
That's what my
to,
husband was at. That'll preach.
so can y'all understand now that the rest in peace, this is what another thing I didn't get a chance to say. I talked about rest in peace more for the living, but you know what? It also is for the dead.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah.
What I didn't get a chance to tell you is Luke 9:23. Anybody know what that is? Come on, somebody get that, because I can recite it off of memory, but I want y'all to read this. So it is about resting in peace.
23.
Luke 9:23. Hey, you all, look, I'm getting chills because guess what?
Okay.
Y'all might shout on this one. Read
Then
it.
he said to the crowd, this is NLT, sorry. Then he said to the crowd, if any of you want to be my follower, you must put aside your selfish ambition, shoulder your cross daily, and follow me.
Hey, somebody read that in King James.
What does that mean? Luke 9:1.
9:23.
And he said to them all, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me.
Can I tell you what taking up a cross means? That you die to yourself. Yourself ought to rest in peace. So your spiritual self can rest in peace.
Wow.
So your natural man, your human side, have to rest in peace, as in die daily. Your spiritual man ought to rest in peace and live daily.
That's good.
I wish I could have said that during the time I preached, but I didn't have time to do it.
It wasn't meant to be then. It was supposed to be for us.
Right. They should have been here. So the rest in peace is a double entendre.
Yeah.
Die, live. Both of them ought to rest in peace.
Yes.
Wow.
Either way.
That'll
bless you.
Wow. That's cool.
That's one of those leadership lessons that'll take it out.
Yeah.
Out of that. Exactly. So that's all I got. What do y'all say about that?
Amen. Yes.
Anybody got anything else?
Tis it so.
All right. I pray that was good. Was that good for anybody? Y'all go ahead and I have.